Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. Interesting topic today. Been looking forward to this conversation for a while, but the Ravens have hired two new assistant coaches, both of whom will have an impact on the passing game. I'm going to let Dev explain some of this to you. Dev Panchwagh, one of the longtime friends of the show. Dev, really happy to have you back.
Hey, appreciate it, Ken. We meet again pretty soon here, but timely topic. I'm chomping at the bit to talk about it because it's something that's weighed on my mind for the better part of 3-4 weeks here since they made the announcement of these hires.
Okay, you've got an article out on this topic right now?
I do. It's at Russell Street Report, and simply the article I think we published it. So it was right around the time I was on your podcast last time out. So just around the same time to talk about cornerbacks. But yeah, the gist of the article, because when the Ravens hired or announced that they hired Keith Williams and T. Martin, it kind of got my interest level up a bit. Now, I guess just to backtrack a bit, these hires were obviously made in the efforts to replace David Culley going to Houston to become their head coach. So, but at the time, it was interesting because T. Martin's name was already out there in the kind of the ecosystem of a coach that was available. I think his contract expired from Tennessee. He was the assistant head coach there. They hired a head coach, a different head coach. So the point is, his name I had already had in my head a bit. I didn't know a ton about him, but just T. Martin, you remember him from his days playing quarterback, winning a national championship. But I know he's a respected coach as well. And then there was some talk that he could be up for the head coaching position there, and that didn't work out. Keith Williams, I'll admit, I had no clue about at all. When the Ravens announced the hire, I did kind of look into his background, and when you peel the onion, it's pretty exciting, the work he's done with some of the biggest and best receivers in the game. So the point is that, yeah, that article for me came about just kind of doing some research, but then looking at the landscape here with the Ravens, their receivers, and how these guys could really make a difference. And so that's where the kernel came from.
All right, which of these guys you want to talk about first?
Let's jump into Keith Williams. I find, it's interesting because I think if folks know at this point in time, Keith Williams was named the pass game specialist or the pass coordinator. What that exactly means, I don't know.
Right. We didn't know for Roman either when he was run game coordinator or tight ends coach or whatever, when there was a different offensive line coach.
Yeah, totally. So it could just be a title that helped get him in the door. Mm-hmm. What he, again, getting back to some of his background, he's worked, I think to this point, before the Ravens hired him, he was labeled a wide receiver guru, but he's working on an individual level. Was, I think, working, if I'm not mistaken, with the Arena League or something to that effect before. But then he has a background, coached in Nebraska as a wide receivers coach there. But the point is that he's kind of like the wide receiver whisperer. He's his latest. The latest guys that he's worked with was Devontae Adams, off and on during what has turned out to be a record-breaking kind of year for him, or kind of his milestone season. And then prior to that, he worked with Sammy Watkins. He worked with Tyreek Hill. So he's worked with the Chiefs receivers. So he's kind of carved out a niche as a go-to receivers coach that works with these players individually. And what I take from that is that outside of their structure, that's how much trust, and that's what his reputation has turned into, that these receivers who are the top of the, kind of the totem pole, have thought to reach out to him and improve their game.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And obviously, the guys who have the individual success, Joshua Harris, obviously a big one with working with Jackson during the offseason,
right,
would be that kind of thing. But he's followed a very typical path for an NFL assistant coach. It's not a glamorous life. Played at San Diego State in the early 90s. He's, by the way, he's not a young man. He's either 48 or 49 years old. I'm not sure which. So he's coming to this job as a receivers coach at an age that's older than Harbaugh was when he's hired as head coach at age 46. So this is a guy, he's a seasoned coach, not an old guy like Culley was, or Dallas Sanders, not a young guy like Sean McVay or any of the other prodigy type coaches. This guy really paid his dues in the college coaching ranks. Solano College 1 year, San Jose State 4 years, San Jose City College for 4 years, Fresno State 3 years, Tulane for 3 years, Nebraska for, I'm not sure exactly how many years, but I have 2015 to 17 in the media guide thing I'm looking for. So he's been around and didn't start his coaching career immediately after his playing career either. So, he's a late blooming coach, I would call him.
Yeah, that's fair to say. It's not a straight and narrow path at all, which is what really intrigues me about him. But there's something about him that has clearly, he's been able to carve out this niche, and there's something about him that these receivers gravitate towards, and he's working with them on an individual basis. And I would say, and maybe, I was curious to get your thoughts on this, but we'll talk about T. Martin first before we dive into the Ravens' perspective. But
sure,
it is not on the face of it, the hire of him is not necessarily does not match up with kind of how they've approached this before, because if you look at, again, his background, he's a hustler. He's coached. He obviously has a passion for it, but it's not like he's coming from an NFL, let alone, like you said, most recently was Nebraska, but it's kind of scant in terms of his, his overall program and college experience even there. So, but that being said, if you're good, you're good. And clearly there's an output here and there's results here that you can't deny.
Yeah, he has a history. He worked with Ryan Grant at Tulane, which is a guy, Ravens fans will remember him as a guy the Ravens signed on the opening day of free agency, or the opening couple of days of free agency. And then they backed out of the contract, or the contract didn't get signed. I think it was he didn't pass his physical. That was the reason given. They really had overpaid on the contract as well. So it's probably a good thing that he didn't pass his physical, but it's, I think, a 4-year, $28 million deal they'd signed him to. So he's bounced around the league a little bit. Ryan Grant has since with Indianapolis and Oakland, and not done a whole lot. But that was one player he worked with at Tulane. And then he also had some experience at Nebraska. And I'm trying to remember who the player he worked with was. Do you have that?
I actually don't have it in front of me. And the funny thing is, I was trying to see what he did in Nebraska in terms of the receivers he worked with there. But yeah, but that's interesting with Ryan Grant, of course, and working with him, regardless of the fact that it didn't work out with the Ravens, he's been he's been a solid, I'd say, slot receiver type guy in the league. So, but yeah, the work recently is really just where I think things have kind of taken off for him. And it's just, I think when you look at this as a potential fit, with the Ravens in general, and then kind of again, snagging him, I feel like, to bring him into this structure, it speaks volumes, I think, to the respect that they have for his work too.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now you want to talk about T. Martin some?
Yeah, let's get into T. Martin again. A little bit more, just in terms of name recognition, it's there. But he was the former OC at USC for quite a bit, and so that's interesting too, because his time there overlapped with when they had some talent at receiver in particular. But Nelson Aguilar, Robert Woods, he worked with Juju Schuster, so. There's quite a bit there in terms of the players and kind of the connection he made there. But I think what's interesting to me, and he was also the wide receivers coach at Tennessee, along with being his assistant head coach. But what's interesting is that he does have that OC background. Mm-hmm. So I think he brings quite a bit to the table. He's obviously and he also worked at Kentucky going back prior to USC. So
with Randall Cobb at Kentucky too. With
Randall Cobb, and Cobb, as you know, kind of former quarterback, right? So he's a great kind of sample of I guess some of the work that T. Martin could do with a guy that wasn't even a natural receiver at the position. So he's evolved into one of the best slot receivers in the league over the last 10 years or so. So, but yeah, when you look at his resume, it's pretty cool, because again, he has the offensive coordinator / kind of specialist role too. So he could pivot in a couple different ways. He's coming in to work with the Ravens receivers. Again, I don't know if there's going to be some overlaps in their roles, or I know that they both know each other from their latest interviews that they conducted with Ravens.com. So that's interesting as well. But T. Martin seems like a very well thought out guy, respected, coming from the college ranks. So is this someone that the Ravens also are kind of the timing is right with him? And is he someone that could take the next step up through the NFL ranks? I'd be curious to see that, but he's got a strong resume as well.
Yeah, and it's a consideration, and I think that they need to have at least a couple of guys who can be part of the succession plan on the offensive side, and they have some guys who aren't. Like D'Alessandris is not, he's a great offensive line coach, but I don't think he's in line to be the offensive coordinator in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of people just don't have that. And they had Wink, very fortunately. They knew what they had, I'm sure, at the time. In the past, they've had multiple guys under Marvin Lewis with Jack Del Rio and Mike Nolan who were kind of ready to take that next step. Rex Ryan, then a little bit later. The Ravens have been good about, on the defensive side of the ball, having options. What they've typically done on the offensive side is to go outside the organization to find their next OC. Roman was kind of breaking that rule.
Yeah, completely. So that has been the pattern, but you could argue that it's kind of created a little bit. It's created a little bit of a lag in terms of continuity. And now all of a sudden you take the same approach that you have on defense. You kind of line up an OC for the future, or someone who, again, is going to have a pretty prominent role. I love this strategy because with a guy like with a guy like T. Martin in particular, you get him ahead of him becoming a bigger name or a hotter commodity elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
So they struck while the iron was hot. I know some of that is kind of just good luck on their end because, or I don't know if good luck's the right way to phrase it, but the fact is that David Culley left. Martin had an issue with his staff. So things kind of lined up. Similar to Anthony Weaver, if you think about it. Like, I don't want to deviate, but it's a similar circumstance where, again, he was a free agent. And I think had he gone anywhere, he would have continued to climb the ladder. It just so happens that he gets this unique opportunity to go to an NFL team. Mm-hmm. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, I think the continuity point that I'm hearing interwoven in here is very important. Is that on defense in particular? Let's start with that, because the Ravens have always been successful there. It's never been a question of moving from one year to the next and not really knowing what's up. But Marvin Lewis stayed that extra year in 2001 when everybody should have been a head coach. Then he had that ridiculous year in 2002 where he was paid by Dan Snyder before he got the job in 2003 at Cincinnati. But the Ravens already were very much into a succession plan at that time. And they had Nolan, who eventually became the defensive coordinator. And they had Jack Del Rio, who went off to the Jags shortly thereafter, but was in line in the succession plan. And when you have that kind of continuity, Nolan is going to bring the things he really likes about Marvin Lewis's defense. He's going to keep those. The players are going to understand those. The players are going to already relate to him as well as they can, from being a positional coach. And I think your expectation is good. You mentioned the lag. That's important. You bring in new systems, new terminology, new everything. You just run the risk that the players either don't accept it or don't process it or don't, absorb it, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, for sure. If you just look at Joe Flacco in that time frame, I mean, from the get-go, they had Cam Cameron, of course, but then
Caldwell and 5 season, 5 years, and yeah.
So that there was some continuity there, but again, the philosophies offensively, I don't know to what extent those were like one-to-one. And then you have Kubiak who comes in, he brings in his system, like a Trustman, and he has a different system. There's some similarities, but there's also some, like in the case of Cam Cameron's office, that was pretty different to me. If you look at it, so it is one of those things. And with a unique talent like Lamar in his right now, at his age, as he's going to move forward, you kind of want to try to work a system around him, or you want to build a system around him, which they've done. But if they were to kind of graduate that system, if you have someone who understands it from Greg Roman's perspective, but then is able to kind of, again, expand from there, that could be that could be, again, that could be a formula for success going forward. So yeah, I agree that there's the potential to have someone in-house already that is understanding it from the player's perspective, but also understanding it from a system perspective is a great. It's got possibilities to really work out well when I think they've had so many of these continuity issues in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these are good if they've found guys who are young and have a good enough reputation and are moving forward. There's always the potential for compensatory picks if they leave. So it's always nice. And I'm not going to say that's the only reason you hire people like this. It's an all other things equal consideration, however. So it should be, and that's exactly why the rule was put in place. Go ahead.
No. I agree. I think that's another incentive, of course. But what I like a lot about this too is that they kind of again dipped in the college ranks, and let's be honest, like they've gone through some retreads. I mean, again, Marty Morningwig, Greg Roman's not. I wouldn't necessarily call Greg Roman a total retread, but he's been around. They've gone in a different direction again for positional coaches. Granted, but still, like I mean, when you look at the Ravens, when you look at Harbaugh's hires in the past, I think there has been a tendency to find guys that he knows fully that have been on his staff or have had strong ties to people he knows, whether it's his brother or whomever.
Right. What the Ravens have not done, and they really have not done this with any that I'm aware of, is to hire that 26 or 27-year-old coach that's a true prodigy. A future head coaching prospect, started, wasn't really a good enough player, knew for sure he wasn't headed to the NFL, immediately became a graduate assistant out of school. And, that kind of coach has eluded the Ravens in terms of hiring. The closest thing they've kind of had to it is Matt Weiss, who was really Harbaugh's secretary. I don't want to put him down, but I mean, that's basically what he's an assistant to John Harbaugh. And then he slowly got a little bit more responsibility in terms of some modeling efforts and was made running backs coach. And now he's quarterbacks coach at Michigan this year.
Yeah. So, one of the many that left the staff. Yeah. To your point. No, I agree. And I don't know that T. Martin is that person either, but I think again, it's going outside of their stream. And I believe it's worth tracking, and I believe it's worth calling out, and I believe it's. I'm excited for him. I think this is such a wonderful.
It's a great opportunity.
Yeah. So again, just think that there's some things here. These hires are worth noticing from the Ravens' perspective. But yeah, that's in a nutshell where these guys are coming from.
Let me jump to this. What would be a win for you in terms of the Ravens' young receiving core that they currently have? Forget Corey Davis or whoever they might otherwise sign. But in terms of the young receiving core, what would be a win for you in 2021?
Yeah. So, let me take it at all four levels. Okay, so all four players. So we start with Hollywood Brown. I think a win would be him going, kind of finishing some of the plays he left on the field last year. But if you were to talk about the coaches and their influence combined with his output or his performance, I think it's some of those details that he lacked, and I noticed last year, for example, just little things like being able to maintain your footwork when you're making a sideline grab and not going out of bounds, right? Like, or just being like a step in front on the ball. These are some of those details, little things that I think that Keith Williams, T. Martin can work with him on, and if he finishes those plays or he figures out the timing with Lamar, coming back to the football, that's a little bit more of a chemistry thing. But could these guys have some influence on that? They definitely could. I could see that. And then you look at, and I don't know whether they've had discussions with them or not or anything. That's kind of just us guessing. But like if they were to talk to him, they just worked with Tyreek Hill, like we said. They worked with Devontae Adams. They worked with Sammy Watkins. Watkins and Hill, their games are very, there's elements of their games that Brown has. So for me, I'm not expecting him to put up big numbers. I don't even know if that's offense lends to that. But if he can finish some of those plays that he left on the field, even half of those plays, right? Some of those deep balls he didn't get to, or just, again, negate some of the drops, I think you're looking at least 1,000 yards, getting back in that 8-9 touchdown, kind of zone. But beyond the numbers, I just want there to be more impact or finishing some of those plays.
I was looking for something else here, and that really is, do you think T. Martin, as an ex-quarterback himself, who's obviously played very well at the college level, won a national championship at Tennessee, would have a natural relatability to Lamar? And you don't want him to replace James Urban, but maybe to basically instill some trust or be a better linker of trust between receiver and quarterback. Because I think in a lot of cases, certainly in Boykin's case, trust has been a big issue. The other thing is to trust your receiver to go get the football and have Lamar focusing on out-throwing the defense is a big concern with this group. With a couple really fast guys like Boykin and Brown, I just think out-throwing the defense and then trusting your receiver there is a great way to succeed.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good observation, because there is a lack of trust, because we know that Lamar trusts Mark Andrews. And so there's been a lot of discussions behind the scenes, percentages, how often he targets the tight ends, and him in particular. How often does he give the 50-50 ball chances to Andrews? But I think macro, if you're looking at it, I could see that being – I think Martin's influence being credible, right? Mm-hmm. Guy that's played the position, I can look at him. He's been successful, and like you said, not to replace James Urban, because in a way, it seems like all these coaches are going to have collaborate and work in the same space to bounce things off of each other. And if Urban is better with the mechanics, maybe some of the mechanics, like maybe that's the focus point. Maybe again, T. Martin could give him. It can help with chemistry. That's just not quite evident right now with the receivers in Lamar. Like being able to just throw that ball up for Boykin to go get. And I agree that there's a disconnect that the staff and the front office has probably looked at and said, we got to change something up here, right, going forward. So 100% could see that T. Martin's influence could go both ways.
Yeah. Excited about that prospect. Do you want to talk about any of the other receivers specifically?
Yeah, let's do it. Boykin we touched on. So it's interesting because there was a quote that Keith Williams had when he was interviewed by Ravens.com recently, and he said, and I know this is his mantra, which is that there's an element of working on the tool set that the receivers have, the skills. Then it's matching that up with a mentality. And I'm worried about that mentality. I hadn't heard anybody put it that way.
Great soundbite. It's a great soundbite.
And so before writing my article, I did read up on what Devontae Adams had said about Keith Williams, and he said this exact same thing in his own way, right? So his point was, I worked with Williams, and he helped me understand that I have to attack the defender before he attacks me. So there's this whole almost again the mentality, but almost like a Sun Tzu kind of way, like Art of War kind of way, getting the receiver in that mindset. And I think Boykin is the kind of number one guy I thought of when he said that, because I don't have anything to back this up. I don't want to pretend like I know Miles Boykin at all. But if you just watch him play at times, and this has kind of gone back to college days, he doesn't always play up to his size. He's not dominant, right? So, and I don't know.
As a run blocker, that's it.
Yes. But if you look at, Chase Claypool, for example, in Pittsburgh, to me, those two guys are they came out of the same group. Right. What sets them apart, I think Chase Claypool just goes and gets the football a little bit more, and maybe he has more opportunities, and that's a fair argument too. But I think there's something to work with if they can get Boykin to start playing like that dog mentality, if you want to just put it that way, right? He's still going to need more reps. He's going to need more opportunity, but I think it's an interesting match, and I think that Williams could get more out of him.
Right. I do think you're exactly on the money with that comment about Boykin. And one of the things that I'd like to see more is him to use his physicality off the line of scrimmage. That's something. There's no way that an opposing defender should be able to reroute a player like Miles Boykin, who's got a lot more length to dictate that first contact. And he should be any guy who comes up in press coverage should pay a price against Miles Boykin for doing so. I mean, jam his shoulder, get to the inside, get that inside leverage you want, beat him on the slant for a 30-yard gain and see if he does it again. I mean, there's been all kinds of things about him being a slow acceleration player that has a high top speed. I'm actually okay with that. What I think the problem is basically that he doesn't decelerate the opponent in certain situations. I completely agree with your comment on that.
Yeah, there's a space issue for sure. If you think now, again, this is all based on our study of very limited attempts. Granted, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, there's been times when if it is a contested or there's a situation where the defender's right on him, you wonder, could he have gotten a little bit more space to work with just by boxing the guy out, just being able to kind of impose his will? And again, that's where I think Williams, you bring in someone who's super technical, like a savant on the technique, how to run the routes to get the release. But also Devontae, I mean, he's not Devontae Adams, but just, again, he's a big receiver. Adams is a big receiver who kind of understands how to use that aircraft. I think you've used that.
Aircraft carrier size, sure.
Aircraft carrier size, right? Boykin has that too. So, I mean, will it translate? I don't know. But I'm just saying that I think we both are saying that there's potential there for sure. And he's got to work on that.
Yeah, I mean, some tight ends are often known for being good basketball rebounders where they're really able to box out with their body better on a lot of plays. And Todd Heap had some of that, although he wasn't the greatest ever for certain. Dennis Pitta probably had a little bit less, I'm going to say. He had a connection with Flacco. Andrews has some of it and is pretty good. But Andrews' biggest thing I'd say is that he's pretty fearless going up for the ball. Right. I think going up for the ball high, he's not concerned about his rib cage all the time. I want to see us have that one tight end who just basically, there's no room here. There's a brick wall between you, then me and my back and my wide body and this football. You're not getting through it.
Yeah, I almost think back, and it's not a tight end, but the way Anquan Boldin operated, which was textbook, just. There was an ability, like you said, the power forward move where I have the ball, I have the space, and for you to get through to me, you're going to have to do something special, which isn't going to happen more times than not. I would like to see, I don't know, like 10% of that.
That might be asking a lot, but Anquan Boldin in that 2012 playoff run, the thing I remember most about it, the 3rd and 1 catch, one of the touchdowns at New England, both of them had it 3rd and 1 the Super Bowl. The defender got his arm in there, the way Marlon Humphrey would want to get a arm in there. And it's just like your arm could get broken off if you do that. And it didn't matter because Anquan wasn't giving up the football or wasn't getting it dislodged. But, that kind of physicality would be great to see out of Boykin. He certainly has the body size and the physical traits that he should be able to do it.
Yeah, and again, this isn't totally in his makeup. Boldin is the extreme example, but there's been glimpses of it there. I mean, he had a good, I think, jump ball in that Seattle game, 2019. The catch in the Dallas game, the touchdown, he had great recognition of the high point of the ball. It's there in some level, right? And I think it's a matter of, can Williams and Martin tap into whether he can be more consistent. And then back to the trust point, can Lamar trust him more? Because Lamar also, I think, has passed on some chances to throw him the ball when he has
for sure
post and he's there and he's open. So it's both.
Yeah. And there's been other times, honestly, where Boykin has betrayed that trust in a way, from the quarterback's perspective anyway, by, the interception in the Tennessee game was the classic one of, he didn't track the football well, but he could have gotten back to disrupt the play. And Andrews has shown an ability to do more of that, particularly in 2020 than 19. I think this is a great opportunity. You look at T. Martin, and I hope he's able to relate a quarterback's perspective on how a receiver needs to help his quarterback, whether that means extending a player, coming back for the ball, boxing out, doing all those things that make you a presentable target to the quarterback. And it's not that Keith Williams won't know these things. It's that Martin is actually teaching you from a very relatable, I used to be a quarterback, that's what I look for perspective.
Oh, totally. And that's where I think they could really work well together, because, again, Williams he's going to focus on the things we just talked about: route running, positioning, how to break off the route, and more, right? Like there's a lot more on the technical side that I just can't, I would be doing a disservice to break it down like here beyond just general stuff. But but then you have a more of a psychology element, or there's other things there, and I could see. And to your point, when you talk about the receivers not coming back to the ball, I thought for the first time in the playoffs, I thought Hollywood Brown did that. A couple times, like in the Buffalo game, he did a great job a couple times just making himself available, coming all the way back to Lamar's sight line and snatching the ball. And I was excited because I was like, okay, I think the light bulb is going off a bit. So now, can all these guys do it? And if we jump to the next guy, Duvernay, there's another deep ball against Tennessee in that first game where, again, I don't think it was all his fault, but could he have done a better job of tracking the ball downfield on that interception in that game, which turned that game? I think they had a 10-point or 11-point lead at that point. But he's another person who mechanically, I think, needed some work coming out of college, just as a route runner, his route tree, a little more basic. But what he brings to the table, he's got tremendous physical ability. And both coaches have already commented on that. I think both have said that he's explosive and physical. So I think he has to work on those nuances. And this is a perfect player for them to shape and mold, because if he can get that down with his route running and kind of improve and kind of just understand some of those things, tracking the football downfield, I could see him taking a good step forward for sure. And in Prosch's case, it's more, I think he has the nuances down as a route runner. Now it's back to, again, can you get a free release? You're a small guy. How do you deal with physical cornerbacks? How do you deal with physicality in the next level?
That's a really interesting thing, because I certainly would have agreed coming out of the draft that Proche was at a spot where he did the right things to get off the line of scrimmage, most polished route runner, and probably the best hands of the guys they had available at that point in the draft. And maybe even on the Ravens, if you compare him to some of the other guys, he still has very good hands. Problem has been, I'm afraid he might be tipping something at the line of scrimmage or in the way he does things, because the Steelers were twice able to get in 3 passes thrown to him all season. The Steelers took 2 of them back to the house with pick sixes. And he caught 1 ball.
That's true. Yeah, that's just
something's going on.
It's hard to overlook that. There could be something for sure there, like that needs to be ironed out. I mean, it's not just a coincidence of those occurrences, but he is someone that I think can get open in zone and kind of sit down in zones. So I'm curious, and he's a little bit more, I think he's a little bit more of a slot receiver all the way, whereas Duvernay I could see going inside and out. So because of his size, his ability to run down the field or run those 9 routes and kind of go outside the numbers. So the question, that's a different question, tactically, how do you use them? But I do think, and this is a point I wanted to make, Ken, for the fans out there. Duvernay and Proche, don't think of them as 3rd and 6th round picks. Now, both of these receivers were drafted in a draft that was extremely deep, if not arguably the deepest draft for receivers ever.
Recent years, yeah.
Recent years for sure. And it's just Duvernay in this draft could have been a 2nd rounder. Proche could have been an earlier pick. I know Proche, and this is according to people that study it, I know they've said that it could have gone 2 rounds earlier. So I think exciting thing is both of them have tremendous physical skills like explosion. Proche is already a pretty good route runner, but they know how to use their speed to decelerate and get some space. So the next thing is they're working with these 2 coaches now. I think there's some upside for both of them. I don't know, again, getting back to numbers and production, I don't know how much that's going to play out in this offense, but long term, I think both of these receivers have the skills they're not Clarence Moores of the world or whoever when, no offense to Ozzie.
DeVar Darling.
Yeah, DeVar Darling, guys that couldn't get open, that didn't really, like, they were big receivers that they didn't have good hands, they didn't run good routes. These guys actually have good hands, they run good routes for the most part, they have speed, they have explosion, so there's something to work with there.
Yeah. It'll be exciting to see what happens with these guys. Really appreciate you coming on, Dev. Always a pleasure to have you. Tell us where folks can find you on Twitter.
They can find me at Dev Panchwagh, and pretty psyched with free agency coming up. I am not the guy to come to for the draft, but I'll get up to speed on that. It's a lot to weed through, but yeah, free agency. You want to talk to me about who the Ravens could potentially sign or what players make sense? I'm up for that discussion anytime, so they can get at me there. And yeah, please do follow up and read this article. Would love to talk more about these coaches and what you think could happen.
All right. Outstanding stuff. I want to tell people out there, we're still working through the positional reviews from 2020. We'll have the free agency previews after that. We're going to have Dev on for one of those. And Dev, appreciate you coming on the show again.
Yes, always. Thanks so much, Ken, for the time and the forum. I appreciate it.
Okay. We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.